Very excited about this podcast. Got notes and everything with highlighted information. I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast with a man that needs no introduction, who I've been a fan of, New Yorker from Long Island. Been in everything. I was going through all the films, and it's been decades. Glenn Gary, Glenn Ross, Working Girl, Miami Blues with the great Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Great.
Love that film. Beetlejuice, The Hunt for Red Octobers, The Royal Tenenbaums, Departed, Blue Jasmine, which is one of my favorites, 30 Rock, philanthropist, classical music lover, father of 17 or 18 children, the excellent, the curious Alec Baldwin is with me on the I Am Rapaport Stereo Podcast.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Did you see?
No, I haven't been doing these things, you know what I mean? But I see you online. I see your Instagram. And I'm always like, you can hear me laughing in the other room. Because there's very few people who tell it as straight as you do.
Online. You know, online is a crazy... Why are you online? I know why I'm online, and some people say to me, why am I online? But when I see you online, sometimes I'm like, through the good, the bad, the Trump, the pandemic, even this week, and every time you get online, it's like... controversy, questioning. Why are you even on social media?
Well, I think that number one, we found, and maybe we found it, maybe my wife figured this out, probably, or we found it on accident, is that you wind up thwarting paparazzi press when you're putting out a whole bin of your own images of your kids and yourself. The more you post online certain stuff, the less the value there is to their pictures of you.
Right.
So they don't, unless they got my wife pregnant walking down the street, you know, which is often. But and for me, I find Instagram can be fun in terms of, and I don't mean to do these rambles where I would talk about a topic, which I like doing that because it's you unedited.
Yes.
Like I've done pieces where the most cogent things I said, as you well know, get cut out.
Yes.
And I get frustrated with that. So I kind of stopped doing that for now. But I would do these rambles, we called them, and I would speak to people in the audience about a topic. But most of it's like, I think it's funny with my kids and so forth. And it's like a PR thing that you control.
I agree.
That you control.
Because like during elections, pandemics, you know, you would get on there and like you get into stuff and like you're a great speaker. You have a lot to say. You're obviously you're an iconic actor. So I would be fascinated watching you do your stuff because it's like even someone that like I've come across you personally, but like, you know, watching you, you know, get on there, I'm like, and I don't know, it's just like you have such a, like, and also you're comedic, but you're also dramatic as a performer.
Right.
So sometimes when you're doing them, they're like, I look at it as performance art. You know, like I think
if you could make it funny, I mean, there's people obviously who are the biggest stars in the world who, I mean, think of some movie stars who have nothing to do with social media.
Very few left.
Yeah, like Leo and people like, you know, they don't bother. He'll post something to promote some environmental thing.
The penguins. He only posts about penguins and grizzly bears. That's it.
That's fine.
But we know you're Leonardo. We know you're on there.
Yeah, well, we love Leo. But
of course.
But the thing is that once you say you don't want to do, you know, Hanks will do little things every now and then, and who's more of a movie star than Hanks? But it depends on what you do. I used to want to pontificate.
Yes.
And now I don't, and I didn't think it was pontificating, but other people would.
Oh, it's pontificating. It's great pontificating.
I would pontificate, yeah, okay. And, but I don't, I kind of slow down on all that now. I really could. But the problem is what forum do you communicate with an audience through? You do TV interviews and they cut them.
Mm-hmm.
You do an interview with someone and they shape it and talk about you a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
I've had people, I think I've always said this in the past. I had one guy when I was making a movie in New Orleans, I had one guy from the Times-Picayune down there who actually was my favorite interview because he wrote exactly what I said in the paper. And he really had the spirit of what I was trying to say. And everybody else, it's the new journalism where they're going, well, what he really meant was,
right.
what he seemed like was, and there's, pardon me, there's a element of psychoanalyzing that they're not qualified to do.
I agree. And I also think that, like you said, I mean, your history with the paparazzi and being followed and the marriages and the divorces and your stuff with the paparazzi is, unique. And it's been for decades.
Right.
I mean, this is since the 90s.
Yeah, I met my ex-wife in 1990. Yeah.
So you've been dealing with it on a different level. Like,
but
it's
I
not
will
just...
say that what I think is important is that, and again, this doesn't excuse anything. I'm not saying this as an excuse. I think there's a profound difference between an excuse and an explanation. And the explanation is that nothing was ever unprovoked. If a guy was 75 feet away from me with a long lens and he wanted to take my picture, I didn't care. But if he walked up and he almost chipped my wife's teeth with the lens of the camera, my favorite one, and I don't mean favorite in terms of I enjoyed this, but the most absurd one was this huge guy. He had to be like 6'4", probably weighed about 250. He's backing up from me with the camera and he's taking my picture as I'm walking in the direction and he's walking backwards and he slips and falls and sits on a baby in a stroller and lands on the baby. He trips and lands on my neighbor's child and sits on the baby. And I thought to myself, this is like, this is really not right. And all of the altercations I've had with people like that, it's always been provoked where some guy walks up and goes, what are you doing with this woman? My wife.
Right.
I mean, she's a whore. They'll say horrible things to bait you.
Right.
Because that guy doesn't want the confrontation. What he wants is for the third guy across the street to film the confrontation.
Right. It's like 3-card Monte guys.
It's 3-card Monte. The journalistic equivalent of 3-card Monte.
Do you find that now? I think this is good. I mean, you've went through the fire. You've dealt with the loss. I don't even know what this stuff. And do you find now that? And I think it's good that the paparazzi, they're a little bit leery of you, which I think is good. They should be. I
don't think they care because I'm so old now. I just don't think that they care. I really do think that, like I don't know how you feel, and I don't say this with any. I'm not celebrating this at all, but it's like you'll see people now. I mean, I'm old enough now, and they'll say, "Oh, I went and saw this movie with so and so," and I'm thinking, I have no idea who that is. I don't know who anybody is anymore. I mean, I'm going to be 65 in April. And I don't know who anybody is.
The younger actors.
Oh, all the Saturday Night Live. The host is Schmokey. And I go, I know no Schmokey.
Right.
I never heard of, whoever the it is. I don't know.
It's changed.
Well, we get older.
Yeah.
And we have a
different
different
perspective.
Different. It's like Long Island. I have this house on Long Island. And we've been out there forever. And when I first went out there, people would say, the old timers that I met would say, oh, it's changed. And I go home and think, I think it's pretty great. I just gotten out there. Now, I've been out there for 40 years, and it's changed.
Right.
Your perspective changes when you get older.
Now, you have on 2 watches. Is this I got to ask, what is this, a child's watch?
This is a cardiac. This is my EKG cardiac thing from my doctor. Yeah.
So is it a Rolex?
No, this is a Breitling that my wife got me that I love. It's my favorite. The Super Ocean, which a lot of Breitling fans. I have a lot of watches, as I'm sure you do.
I don't. This is the only. I'm not a watch. You know when I stopped wearing watches? When I had my first kid, because when I was holding him, it would always get stuck on him, and then I stopped.
Yeah, I have a lot of watches, and I have some just stunning watches, and but this I wear because it's an EKG program, and you do that. It Bluetooths to your phone, and you send it to your doctor because I've been doing a lot of cardiac testing now that I'm going to be 65.
Got to do it.
Got to do it.
Now, also, one of the things, now, let me just say this. There's a couple of things, besides just your acting, and I said this to you the one time I spoke to you on the phone, I've always loved that you're such a fan, and you're a fan of actors, you're a fan of classical music,
right.
And you're not a shy fan. You like to fan out on other actors. You like to talk about your experience with other actors that you love, that you admire, and you've done it openly, which is something that I think it's definitely something that I really appreciate, respond to.
But I find, I don't know what you're like, but I find that with my podcast, I do it because of my curiosity. And, we try to have famous people, musicians, actors, what have you, people in the arts, writers, but we also try to have people where there's some issue. Like where I'm going to interview a guy tomorrow who just has a book out, and he was the principal obituary writer for the Wall Street Journal.
Interesting.
And we want to talk to him. We always have an array of people where the topic is what's interesting to me. And but I don't know what you're like, but I never want to talk about, like if I go to a film festival, this is the best example, and they say, we want you to come and be an honoree at a film festival. What film of yours do you want us to show? And I'll go, and I'll say, oh God, I don't want you to show any of my movies. I want you to show Red River with John Wayne. Let's show a great film and we'll talk about it. But I don't really like to draw attention to myself in terms of acting and my work, because I really believe that I've never once had a satisfying experience making a movie my whole life. Never.
Really?
Never. In terms of the work, meaning it's like when you're honored to, Scorsese says, come and do The Departed, come and do The Aviator. Those are small roles, and you're honored to be there. You're so appreciative of all the people you're working with, when I did Glengarry and things like that. But in terms of my own satisfaction, only sometimes in the theater did I feel, because you can have more time, you rehearse obviously and but in films, I can't name one film I've ever done that I was fond of.
During or the results?
Either. No, during was the memories are of the people.
The memories of the time.
I never sit there and say, oh, we shot that scene and watch how I say this line. I just don't even bother with that. But I'll sit there and go, I'll never forget, talking to Jack Lemmon or talking to George C. Scott or someone that I really deeply admired.
Driving in the van and hearing those things.
Think that when a movie will come on and I'll see a scene and I'll go, I remember that day. That's when I had a flat tire on the Ventura Freeway and I was late to work and whatever it was. But I never look at films of mine and go, watch this. You know what I mean? Like I'm digging it.
Are you, when you're working, I mean, it's probably changed throughout the years, but when you're working on a set and you're doing a scene and you're, in a good movie or a good show, are you struggling to satisfy yourself? Like, are you able to sort of self-direct and self-monitor? Like, I've gotten to the point where, and I think some of it is because when I've done television, directors come in and out where you go, that was good, to myself. Like, because I can't defer to a stranger. I can't defer to somebody, say, like when you're as a young actor, you're like, was that good? Was that good? But do you struggle in between takes? Do you like when you say nothing's ever been satisfying, you don't go home and go, I did what I attempted, my goals.
All I think about is what I should have done.
Really?
I go home and I do what I call rear view mirror acting. I look at myself in the rear view mirror and I'll go, listen to me, Bob. I'll say the line.
Right.
And I go, oh, that's how I should have said the line. But like you were saying, we all have had to become self-directing. There's more jobs out there. There's more square mileage now in the business than there are good directors.
Yes.
And so when you go in, we've all had to develop that self-directing muscle. When you go on the set and you're with a great director like Marty or somebody like that, you just stand there and he's got it worked out. He's got it worked out. He knows what he wants to see. He knows the rhythm of it. Say that line faster, come in quicker, do this, do that. You welcome that. But with a lot of other people now, you go in and, at my age, you're there saying, I've made more movies than everybody on this set. I know more about acting than everybody on this set, unless I'm with somebody who's one of the greats. And I just, you have to become self-directing. It's tough. And I'd rather be directed.
And what to you makes a great director? You've worked with Woody Allen, who I worked with, who is directorless almost, and it's almost actor proof. I've never worked with Scorsese.
Who's a director you loved?
Woody.
Right.
Spike Lee. Tony Scott for different reasons. Nora Ephron for different reasons. But I've never all those directors that I worked with, it wasn't the direction. It was the confidence they gave you,
Right.
or the belief they gave you. Even with Woody Allen, where you do 1 or 2 takes and you go, well, at first it was like, what the fuck? I've been practicing this for 6 months. But then well, he knows he's got it. Even though you want to keep going because you're having such a good time.
Yeah.
But I've found I've never gotten it's like Nora Ephron. I would ask her questions. She'd go, I don't know, but let's figure it out later. Tony Scott, similar thing. Spike Lee and
What did you shoot with Tony?
Tony Scott, True Romance. And I was really young. I mean, I was 24 and impressed. I was like, and on the sets, Christopher Walken and Val Kilmer and Christian Slater. And I'm like, what the
big people.
But he made me feel like, and I'd ask, I'm trying to actor shit like this. He'd go, that's good. That's not good. But keep asking me questions. And that made me feel like, all right. But I when people ask me, non-actors, like, what is a director? I've never had like a magic sauce or somebody sort of wave a magic wand and you're like, oh, that's it. Like, so for you, what is a good director?
Well, I mean, one thing that comes to mind in reference to what you said that I thought was interesting was I had a director once say to me, and I'll never forget this, and it was not in the beginning of my career, it was later in my career, and he said to me, we were going to do a couple more takes. And I said, maybe we were like at 4 or 5 takes. And he goes, I think we got it. And I know that everybody's in a hurry time-wise, they want to move on, and if they got it. And I go, can we do 1 or 2 more takes? He goes, yeah. He goes, but I just want you to keep in mind. He goes, sometimes you knock the guy out in the first round. Sometimes you knock him out in the 10th round. He goes, what does it matter? You knocked him out. That's all that matters. You probably would rather knock him out in the first or the second round and get it. You know what I mean? He said, sometimes we get it early.
Right.
And sometimes we don't. And I'll tell you. And I trusted him once he said that. I trusted that he was observing things in a way that I could appreciate. And for me, a good director is somebody who they make you see the movie like a symphony. A symphony has its highs and lows, its adagios and its pizzicatos and what have you. And I want someone who they're going to tell me, what am I in their movie? Like an ingredient in a salad. I don't need to come in here and jerk off and make myself look powerful and clever and all these other things. What am I in your movie? And tell me and one of the things I do now and have for the last several years, I'll say, tell me the story of the movie. Tell me about your movie like it's a story. And you'd be surprised how many directors can't do that.
It's a good question.
But then there's ones who will tell it to me. Well, this is a story about a guy or a woman or whatever. And I only want to come in and give you what you need in the movie and resist that temptation to want to pull focus and do too much,
Did you enjoy, I liked it, and it's changed the way I read scripts. You've worked with Woody Allen a couple of times throughout the years, smaller parts. Do you enjoy when he would give you only your scenes in the script?
Well, I didn't, listen, when you work with Woody, you're working with somebody who, we were in Italy for the opening of To Rome with Love with Jesse Eisenberg and Greta Gerwig and what was Ellen Page.
Right.
And now
Elliot Page.
Elliot Page. And we were there and the press, the Italian press really only wanted to talk to Woody. So all of us were on a dais and they'd say, okay, you. And the reporter would go, Woody, I have a question for Woody. And they'd ask Woody. So finally, they asked us a question. What does this mean to you, to work with Woody? And I had worked with him in this movie, Alice,
yes,
with Mia years ago. And I said, the thing about Woody is that as a star, as a comedic performer, as a movie star, as a writer, producer, what have you, I said, the thing that you got to remember is that first and foremost, Woody is a writer. And at the corner of my eye, at the end of the table, you saw Woody nod. Like, that's the thing I think he takes the greatest pride in, is that he writes these movies which are, like, I'm not joking when I say if I'm really depressed, like if I can't get out of bed, and which those days are not often with 7 children, But if I'm really down, then I really don't feel like the world is what I'd like it to be. I watch Broadway Danny Rose and I feel great. I'm on my feet. You know what I mean? I mean, like the brilliance of that writing and the way he timed that movie. And with him...
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, it's like with him...
That film particularly is ridiculous.
It's really great. I love that.
It's so goddamn good cinematically, the writing, the blocking, the cinematography, the editing, the way he sets up the shots. I was just talking about it. I watched it maybe 6 months ago.
I watch that movie all the time.
Fawning over it.
I watch that movie all the time. Who's the cheese eater? May God forgive me, Barney Dunn. Then they cut back to the guys at the cafe. Barney Dunn. You remember, he was the stuttering ventriloquist. So Danny. I mean, that whole sequence, I'm just crying laughing.
And the mobsters' faces, and like, you know, it's one of the first films where they made mobsters funny.
Yeah.
You know, it came with a time where, like, you know, like he's like sort of comedic mobster.
Are you an Aries, Johnny? Are you an Aries? He says to him up on the balcony.
Yeah.
I mean, but the thing is that it's like, what's something that can or movies that you can go back to that really just resonate for you? I mean, I love old movies. When Bob Osborne was alive, he had me come down and do a lot of this guest programming with him on Turner Classic Movies.
Oh, right.
I tell you, it was one of the greatest times of my life. I love Bob. He was the loveliest guy in this business. He invited me to come down there and do 3 rounds of that. Eventually, the producers were like, get him out of here. You know, we know enough of him. But I came down and did it with Bob 3 times. And we did the wraparounds for the essentials. And, you know, they'd send me the discs and they'd say, you know, watch these movies. And some of them I didn't have to, like half of them or more I didn't have to because I'd seen them already. And then I watched some that I'd never seen before. And I think people have forgotten movies that can actually reach inside of you. You know what I mean? And really affect you.
I agree.
I think that more and more movies now are as just escape, you know.
And I think movies in general are it's a really sad, you know. I was watching Tootsie this weekend.
That's funny.
You know, and I'm like, this is not even close to being ever made ever again.
No,
like,
never.
why would this ever be? You know, it's never going to be made again.
Right.
It'd be some weird, obscure, tiny movie that maybe would make it to Sundance and do well at Sundance.
Right.
And this was a big.
It probably wouldn't get made.
It wouldn't get made.
Could it be appropriation?
All of it.
Yeah.
The whole thing. But just the kind of movie and the way it was shot. What is his levels good, Dave, with the mic and everything?
Am I good?
Yo, thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of this interview. Let me know what you thought of Alec Baldwin. Let me know what your favorite Alec Baldwin performance was. I appreciate you guys watching.